in the next source. What does it mean? Kol Adam, Klomar, Kol Adam, Afilu Ani. Hamikabel Tzedakah, says the Bach. Chayov Lateit Mimash Nasnu Lo L'Shar Evyonim B'Purim. Why? Look what he says, word for word. The ein din matanot le'evyonim b'Purim kedin shar tzedakah. The hechsher mitzvah Purim. Keinu lateit matanot le'evyonim, ukedin arba kosot kol dechvin. That's why I wanted to see b'Pesach. Afilo ani. Everybody has to do it. Even the aniyim. As opposed to, if you look on the bottom of the Bach, but shar tzedakah, the kol hashana ein ani. Hamikabel tzedakah chayba only pamachat b'shana. You think davar mu'al tzedakah kadei l'kayim mitzvot tzedakah, right? A poor person has to give once a year to be able to be mekayim his mitzvah of tzedakah, right? So here comes, as opposed to the Shari Tshuva who quotes the Pri Chadash that says an ani is patur mi matanot le'evyonim. Here we see the Bach, the Taz say that you're chayiv for an ani is chayiv for matanot le'evyonim, saying clearly that it is fundamentally different than the regular. It's not just tzedakah. Give me 1 second, Dave. The interestingly enough, also, I told you the end of the Gemara Megillah Daf Zayin. We had talked about the that the two brothers, Abayi bar Avin and Rav China bar Avin, switched the sudas. Right? The Rush, when he brings it down, I can't say that I saw it from the Rush. Right? Because the Rosh himself just quotes the Gemara, right? And then at the end he quotes the story Abayi bar Avin, Rav Chanina bar Avin, Mechalfis Sudusai La'adadi. So it could have been anything. However, for sure in the Kitzer Piskei HaRosh, if you turn the page, he says Tzarich l'shloach bet manot la'adam echad u'shtei matanot l'shnei evyonim im hichlif sudato b'shel chaveiro yatza yedei matanot. Right? Just giving the su'uda, you switch the su'uda, he says, as opposed to, let's say, I just brought you one source, it's a major machlokas, right? For example, the Marsha, understanding from Rashi, it's talking about a din, it's a special din. That din is telling me about mishloach manos. I told you. That concept of mechalfi sudusayu could be talking about one of three things now. Could be talking about matanot levyonim, as we just saw from the Rush. Could be talking about, Rashi says, some special teaching me a din about mishloach manot, whatever din that is, or it could be talking about the din of suda, right? So here the Rush says that it's talking about matanot le'evyonim, and again, one of the pieces here I would say is the v'imhichliv b'surato b'shel chaveiro, right? You might think you have to give poor people. A lot of times, poor people, what do we say? Like, for example, right? The Rambam talks about in a Sudat Yom Tov, right? That if you don't have poor people, you're simchat kreso. You're filling your own belly, not a real simcha. Normally, the model of aniyim are people not in your family, and specifically here, what's it talking about? It's talking about the two brothers, or Mechalfi Sudusayu. Again, it might be telling me something different than the mitzvah of tzedakah.
Is that, sorry, switching the sudas, is that from a child of your name, or is that from a shelf?
The what? Say it again?
Like, for two people switching.
Right, so how that is a three-way machloket. Right? How to understand when they switch the suda. So the Rosh said matanot. Right? Rashi had said it's a special din in Mishloach Manot. And others say that it's maybe teaching me a special din in the Suda. What I just tried to say is that maybe what the pshat in the Rush, and that it's a Yotzi Matanot, again, a fourth difference in Matanot, normally Evyonim is maybe somebody outside of the family. Right here, maybe it's specifically in the family. The
Can we just assume that
yeah.
it doesn't say clearly that it's talking about two poor people? Okay, it's just a regular case between two normal people. So, and we can say that it's definitely not talking about just Shalmanos to the Sudan.
Okay, could be. Again, I'm just telling you what the Rush said. The Rush felt for the reason that this was a continuation of the Matanot Evyonim, which was, it's interesting because the Gemara right in between, which we skipped, is all about definitely Mishloach Manot also, at least. Before I even discuss the Rambam, what I want, I'm going to answer Dave's question. we didn't. I like to define what. So we've pointed out 3, maybe 4 differences into whether it's tzedakah or maybe we see that it's got its own status here. The question is, what is this? What is it? If it's not just tzedakah, so then what is it? What is obligating me to give the matanot levyonim? If it's not just regular tzedakah, what is it?
Could be midin simcha.
Ah, so good. So that's if you look at the Ritva. The Ritva, we'll come back to the Rambam in a second. The Ritva on page 4. This is a Ritva for the ages. The Ritva says, what? Yeah. The question is, well, we have these 4 differences, at least 3 differences, about who has to give it, right? There could be other differences about when you have to give it. We're not going to get into all there's a lot of details. But how much do you have to give also, which we're going to get to. There's another, that's going to be a 4th difference for sure, if not a 5th. So what is it then? If it's not tzedakah? We're saying it's not tzedakah, because tzedakah has its own rules. A regular tzedakah, if I give you X, and you only need half of that, you can do the rest with other tzedakah. Or you could change the venue. Here you can't. It's got to use it for Purim. Here everybody has to do it, right? Here, even the ani, as opposed to regular tzedakah, and ani has to do it once a year. So we see a lot of difference. The question is, what's the nature then of matanot levyonim if it's not just tzedakah?
Could we just say that maybe because the idea behind all this is because it's because everyone, like the whole Jewish nation, took part in the mix, meaning women and men, poor and rich. So meaning maybe all this mitzvah is to make sure that every single person has like a connection to it, or like has something to do with it.
Right.
Like even the poor people.
Right. So what you're saying is not very different than Rav David said. I'm going to say one little difference. If I wouldn't have, except for that one piece in the Tosfos Rosh, but it's parts. I have a chiyuv. You're saying it's midin simcha. It's simcha that I want to make sure everybody's happy because everyone's involved. Haman wanted to kill everybody. Lashmi la rogul abedit kol hayudim. Minar ad zaken. Right. I want to say something a little different. If you look at the Ritva, and it comes back to our original question. Remember I asked about Oprah? Remember Oprah? We talked about Oprah. Now, the Ritva says, quotes the Gemaras that we've seen. Okay, everything. And then he says what we've said. He says, She'ein tina zo, I'm on page 4, midin tzedakah gridata. It's not only tzedakah, ela midin simcha. It's also midin simcha. Shari afla shirim yesh l'shalach manot. You can even give it to rich people. Even though he calls it manot here, he's talking about matanot levyonim. Lefikach nagu litain ma'ot purim legoyim va'afilu ashirim shekevon. Now here the truth is he goes and changes a little bit and says that only kevan she'anu nonim lekol adam im lo nitain lahem, there will be eva. Okay, but the first part of the Ritva says that what? It's midin, the mitzvah, not only of tzedakah, but also midin simcha. I want to define the simcha not only to make others happy, but I think that the simcha might be of the giver. The simcha means that if I'm giving the ashir, why? He doesn't need it. It's not necessarily the din of simcha of the receiver. It might be the simcha of the giver. And I want to explain why, but first I just want to quickly, since I have 5 minutes left, just to look at the sheet of the Rambam. Because the Rambam, tell me if you agree with me how I see the Rambam. The Rambam, when he's talking about here in Perek Bet, he first talks about the 14th and 15th day, Mitzvah and Halach Yudal. Mitzvah Yom Arbasa lebnei Kfarim v'Yarot v'Yom Chamish Asar lebnei Krachim. Liot Yom Simcha u'Mishteh Mishloach Manot l'Reyim u'Matanot l'Evyonim u'Mutar ba'asiyat Malacha v'Afa Pikein ein Roy la'asot Malacha, etc. Then he says, Bnei Kfarim, villagers, shekadmu v'karu b'sheni or b'chamishi im chalku ma'ot l'Evyonim b'Yom Kriyatan Yatsu. Okay, he had the machlokas, which we're not going to get into right now, of the Mishnah. He understood that, what does it mean by mutar, by matanot levyonim if they came in early? That you could be yotze, you don't have to give matanot levyonim early, but you could be yotze matanot levyonim even early, in their times when they read the Megillah. But then he says, "Aval simcha v'amishteh ein osin ota ela biyom arbasar," on the day. V'mikdimo lo yatsa. If you made it earlier, then you're not yotze. Then he says, "Sudat Purim she'asa b'layla lo yatsi de chovato." So the simcha v'mishteh. The question is, what is he talking about? The simcha v'mishteh? Is he talking about the suda? Because if he's talking about the suda, so again, the case is that if the bnei farmer coming in early because they, let's say, had to do kriyat Torah or had a judgment, right? They read the Megillah, they did Matanot Levyonim. Says the Rambam, they're Yotzei, they're mitzvah Matanot Levyonim. But what?
Megillah as well?
They're, yes, Megillah as well. That was a special takana for them. Aval simcha v'hamishteh ein osin otal b'yom arba'asa. What's the nature of the simcha v'mishteh? I would have thought su'uda, but I'm not so sure because maybe you should have said su'uda. Because look what the next thing he says: "Usudas purim she'asa b'layla lo yatzei de chovato." So let me say in a couple words earlier, also suda. What?
Could it be that the simcha is suda, and when we said meaning the yom, meaning actually it's during the day of the 14th, not at the night. Maybe that's because that's when they had simcha. Then that's simcha.
No, the Suda Purim, that's like the next halacha within the halachot. Suda Purim, Sha'as B'Layla, I mean, it's continuing on.
That could be a part of why can't that be what he's talking about when he's saying?
I'm saying it could be. I mean, even think it might be the simple pshat. I'm not sure. Okay? But let's continue, because it might not be. Or it might be, I'm just giving drush on that line. We'll see. Then he says, halacha tetvav, ketzar chovat suda zo. He talks about the chov of the suda. Sheyocha basar v'itakin suda na'ek kefi asher timsa yado. Drink wine until you're intoxicated. V'yera dein b'shechrut, and go to sleep. V'chein, included in the suda, he says, chayev adam l'shloach shtei manot. Right? Then if you keep going, the next halacha tet zayin. Okay? V'chayev lechalek la'aniyim b'yom ha'purim. V'chayev. Halacha tet zayin starts a v'ch. V'chayev l'chalek, meaning everybody reads this Rambam and says you have a suda. Included in the suda is not only the drinking, but is also mishloach manot. Now, what I want to say also is, what does he include here also? Matanot Levyonim. V'chayev.
But even though he separated,
so what?
Even though he separated it before.
But he's saying v'chayev, so just start chayev. You've never seen him start chayev before? No? It could be what you're saying. I think so. Just say chayev.
The next halacha he compares it to.
That's true. Exactly. Mutav la'adam laharbot b'matanot le'evyonim, me laharbot b'sudato uv'shloach manot l'riyav. Right. He links suda mishloach manot, and he correct. Mutav la'adam laharbot in Matanot Levyonim, Mila Harbot, Suda Mishloach Manot. Good. So that is probably not the proper deal. Correct. Okay? Yeah.
Maybe the vav is to link the level too. Maybe not.
And what?
Just like the chayiv in Suda / Mishloach Manot, you're also chayiv in
Matanot Levyonim. Okay. Question is, why would I need that? That's what we said before also. It's true. So that's the question also. And just one other piece, and then I'll tell you what I think the Rambam says. Mutav, help me understand this last halacha also. Mutav la'adam la'arbot ma'matanot v'nim, then sudato v'shloach manot l'riyav. Why? She'ein sham, no, I don't think shame. Sham, simcha gdola u'mifurara, elo l'sameach leiv aniyim v'yitomim v'amanot v'gerim. Sham l'sameach leiv ha'umlalim ha'elu doma l'shchina. Shene'emar lachayot ruach shvalim ulachayot leiv nitkaim. What's he talking about? What's the simcha he's talking about? There's no greater simcha than what? Giving to what? Is he talking about the Suda? No. The simple pshat is definitely talking about Matanot Levyonim. If I would have more time, I would show you the Rambam in Hilchos Yantif talks about, which I said before in Parak Vav, in Hilchot Yom Tov, that says when you have a Suda, right, you make sure you have to be Mesameach Aniyim, because the ain't simcha until misameach aniyim, and then I told you about the smechas kresa. Here the Rambam is saying something totally different. He's talking about the simcha is what? He's talking about Matanot Evyonim. And what's the simcha? That I'm being mesameach these people that are in need, and I'm doma l'shchina by doing that. It could very well be that the Rambam is saying that there's basically two dinim within Matanot Evyonim, what we've talked about. When you give it before Purim, you're yotzei the mitzvah. What mitzvah? Tzedakah. Right? You gave tzedakah before Purim. You did what you were supposed to do. People are waiting for it. You're yotzei the mitzvah of tzedakah. But what are you not yotzei? The mitzvah of simcha. The mitzvah of simcha of giving is done. It's a chiyuv on Purim itself. And the nature of that simcha is to what? To be domed to the Shechina, to be able to go and make others alive, make others happy. Doesn't matter whom. That is the two-part mitzvah. If I had to say it and try to conclude, it could very well be that bottom line, la halacha, you're not yotzei if you only gave Oprah Winfrey, right? Just so you should know, bottom line, halacha, you're not yotzei your mitzvah mishloach manot, right? It's a good idea because they're eva, but you're not yotzei the mitzvah. But the concept of me giving to an usher, Matanot Evyonim, before the shiur, you think is ludicrous, right? But the concept, again, may not be exactly within what the Rambam just said, because he specifically talked about the simcha of being doma to the Shechina, of lachayot, of imitating God, right? Of who's lachayot umlalim. If you want to take it in a small, different angle, I thought that very much possible, especially if you want to say that Matanot Evyonim and Mishloach Manot are one and the same. Even if not, you want to say Mishloach Manot is for the Seudah. But I think the other three mitzvot have the common denominator of the mitzvah of Simcha just in three different realms. The mitzvah of Kriyat Megillah is the mitzvah in Dibur. The Simcha of what? Of L'Shabeach et Hashem. If you look at the Rambam, not here. The Rambam talks about how the mitzvah, it's mamish to be misameach, that you're happy that Hashem fulfills His promises, lehodia, to everybody, that He, umigoy gadol, the greatness of our nation. That's the Persumei Nisa that happens there also. The concept of drinking on Purim, as the Maharal says, of Adelo Yada, it's the mitzvah of Simcha b'machshava. It's being able to say, I'm not going to be able to start using my thumbs and say, here, do I know what? Is he a tzaddik, not a tzaddik? You put away the seichel, right? And you have the kedushas haguf, the concept of machshava, of being able to be with the Ribono Shalom, and know that I'm dependent on the Ribono Shalom, without my own da'at and thinking that I'm always running the show. And finally, the simcha of Matanot Evyonim, I think, is the simcha of ma'aseh. It's the simcha of you giving. And the simcha, if we had to just conclude, the Levush talks about the simcha of Purim in contrast to Chanukah. Chanukah is more of a spiritual one. They didn't want to destroy our Beit HaMikdash, they just wanted to contaminate, to defile it. But here they wanted in Purim, Haman and Russia and Achashverosh also wanted to destroy Lashmi, Larogo, Abed HaYudim. What we're celebrating is the Kedushat HaGuf. We're celebrating it both in Dibur, in Machshava, and in Maaseh, and the biggest way to show it is to give, whether it's, as the Rambam said, to be Doma Leloka, to be Lachayot Umlalim, or just to show that you're alive. You just give. You don't think about it. Ein medaktik, ein medavar. It's just a matter of showing you chiyut. The biggest way maybe to love, to give, to be b'simcha, is really to give. So we should all be zoche to be able to continue really have that kedushat haguf this coming Purim. The minimum of Nemetzal said Matanot Evyonim, which is interesting, is the worth of to buy lechem in the store. I thought that was interesting, whatever that is. I don't know how much it costs lechem. If it's 10 shekel, 20 shekel, 15 shekel, right? What? It depends how much lechem, right, for your Suda. But what's interesting is when he said that to me today, is that the Rambam, for example, it's machloket, but the Rambam, when he talks about the Suda, it doesn't include lechem, right? Ketzad chovat Suda, yid basar, to have a sukkah, but there's no lechem. The Rav Yah, there's another famous Rav Yah besides the one about women and leaning, right? The Rav Yah says that shavi like a chova now to have a sudas pas. The Meiri also says sudas pas, but that's an interesting idea. Definitely the mitzvah to give it on Purim. So I hope what we've done, just to conclude, is to show the different frameworks of Matanot Levyonim, whether it's exactly the same as Mishlach Manot, or we saw that maybe in the She'otot and the Ran. Staka, we saw at different angles, then we saw 4 to 5 differences, whether it may not be Staka Gredata, but rather maybe Staka Quasi, Staka and Simcha. We start within the Rambam that the giving before is maybe Bidin Staka, but the actual Simcha has to be on